The stars burned bright above the crystal towers of Volantis Prime. Ships from 17 different star systems filled the sky, each one carrying princes and lords and warriors who had come for one reason. They had come for Princess Valithra. She stood on the highest balcony of the Grand Palace, watching the ships land one by one. Her silver skin glowed softly in the starlight. Her eyes, deep purple and ancient, showed no excitement. She had lived for nearly 300 cycles, and in all that time, she had never met anyone who saw her as more than a prize to be won. Her father, Emperor Korath, had declared the selection ceremony. By the laws of the Solarian Empire, Valethra had to choose a mate before her 300th cycle ended. The Emperor had invited the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He believed his daughter deserved nothing less than the best. Valethra was not so sure she agreed. The first ship to land belonged to Prince Dranketh of the Valorian Dominion. He was tall and proud, with scales that shimmered like liquid gold. His people controlled 10,000 warships and ruled over 50 conquered worlds. When he walked down the landing ramp, his guards carried banners showing all the enemies he had defeated. The second ship brought Lord Sithax of the Nebula Confederation. He was thin and pale, with eyes that seemed to look through walls and into minds. His species had evolved beyond physical strength. They could read thoughts, break wills, and drive enemies mad with a single glance. Lord Sithax smiled as he entered the palace, and servants fell silent wherever he walked. The third ship was a war vessel of the Kryn hegemony. High Commander Zelthos stepped out in full battle armor. He stood 8 feet tall and had 4 muscular arms. His species was bred for one purpose: combat. Zelthos had never lost a fight. His body was covered with scars, each one a trophy from a fallen enemy. More ships landed through the day and night. Valethra watched them all from her balcony. She saw wealth beyond counting, power beyond measure, and ambition that stretched across the stars. She saw everything except what she wanted. She wanted someone who would see her. Not the crown, not the empire, just her. Among the great ships and mighty fleets, there was one small vessel that almost no one noticed. It was a human ship called the Starward Hope, and it looked old and tired next to the gleaming warships around it. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only been traveling among the stars for about 100 years. Most of the older races did not take them seriously. The human delegation was small. There were 3 diplomats, 2 guards, and 1 maintenance engineer named Danny Cole. Danny was 34 years old. He had grown up in a small town in Ohio on a planet called Earth. He had always been good at fixing things. Broken machines, faulty wires, problems that seemed impossible. Danny had a gift for looking at something broken and seeing how to make it whole again. He had never planned to travel to the stars. But the human government needed people who could solve problems, and Danny had solved more problems than anyone could count. So they sent him with the diplomatic team, just in case something broke down. When Danny stepped off the ship and looked up at the crystal towers, he felt very small. The other beings around him were giants and warriors and telepaths. He was just a man with a toolbox and a stubborn streak. The opening feast was held in the Grand Hall that evening. It was the largest room Danny had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Floating platforms carried servants back and forth. Music played from instruments that seemed to be made of pure light. Danny sat at the human table, which was placed near the back of the hall. The important guests were seated near the front, close to the Emperor and the Princess. Danny could barely see them from where he sat. He did not mind. He was not there to impress anyone. He was there to make sure the humans did not embarrass themselves, and to fix anything that needed fixing. The feast began with speeches. Prince Dranketh spoke about the glory of his conquests. Lord Sithax spoke about the superiority of mental power. High Commander Zelthos did not speak at all. He simply crushed a metal goblet with one hand to show his strength. Danny ate his food, quietly, and tried not to stare. Then the lights flickered dotted first. No one seemed to notice. The guests were too busy watching the suitors perform. But Danny noticed. He had spent his whole life noticing small things that were about to become big problems. The lights flickered again, and this time a strange humming sound came from the walls. Danny stood up from his table. One of the human diplomats grabbed his arm. "Where are you going?" She whispered. "Something is wrong with the power system," Danny said. "I need to check it out. We cannot cause a scene. Sit down." But Danny was already walking toward the nearest service door. He had learned long ago that asking for permission often took longer than just fixing the problem. The service corridors behind the grand hall were dark and filled with strange machinery. Danny pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and followed the sound of the humming. It led him down 3 levels, past pipes that glowed with energy, until he found the source. The atmospheric shield generator was failing. Danny did not know exactly how the alien technology worked, but he could see the problem. A connection had come loose, and energy was bleeding out instead of flowing where it needed to go. If the shield failed completely, the grand hall would lose atmosphere. Everyone inside would die. He had maybe 5 minutes. Danny opened his toolbox and got to work. He did not have the right tools for alien technology, but he had wire and tape and something the humans called ingenuity. He traced the power flow, found the weak point, and created a bypass using materials that were never meant to work together. The humming stopped. The lights stabilized. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead and let out a long breath. No one would ever know how close they had come to disaster. And that was fine with him. He was not looking for glory. He just wanted to fix things. What Danny did not know was that someone had been watching. Princess Valathra had grown bored with the speeches. She had slipped away from the high table, using a hidden passage known only to the royal family. She often escaped the noise of court life by wandering the service corridors alone. She had seen the human leave his table. She had followed him out of curiosity, and she had watched him save everyone in the grand hall without asking for anything in return. The other suitors fought for attention. They demanded praise. They showed off their power at every opportunity. This human had fixed a problem that would have killed thousands. And then he had simply walked back to his table and continued, eating his dinner as if nothing had happened. Valathra returned to her seat at the high table. Her father was asking which suitor had impressed her most. She did not answer. But for the first time in many cycles, she felt something close to interest. The human was nothing like the others. And that, she thought, was exactly what made him worth watching. The selection ceremony was not just about showing up and looking impressive. The ancient laws of the Solarian Empire required all suitors to prove their worth through 3 sacred trials. These trials had been used for thousands of cycles to separate the worthy from the unworthy. The first trial was the Trial of Strength. The suitors gathered in a massive arena carved from the mountainside. Thousands of spectators filled the seats above. Emperor Korath sat on a floating platform with his daughter beside him. Princess Valathra looked down at the competitors with the same distant expression she always wore. The Trial of Strength was simple in concept, but brutal in practice. Each suitor had to demonstrate their physical power in whatever way they chose. The judges would score them based on the impressiveness of their display. Prince Dranketh went first. His scales began to glow with heat as he stepped into the center of the arena. He took a deep breath and then flew straight up into the sky, breaking through the clouds and disappearing from sight. Moments later, he came crashing back down like a meteor, striking the ground with enough force to shake the entire mountain. When the dust cleared, he stood in a crater 100 feet wide, completely unharmed. The crowd cheered. The judges gave him excellent marks. Lord Sithax approached next. He did not move from his position. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. Across the arena, massive boulders began to rise from the ground. They spun around him in complex patterns, faster and faster, until they were moving so quickly that they became a blur. Then, with a gesture, he shattered them all into dust that fell like rain. The crowd applauded. The judges were impressed that High Commander Zelthos needed no tricks. He walked to the center of the arena and pointed at the largest stone pillar standing at the edge. It was solid rock, 50 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Zelthos ran toward it at full speed. When he struck it with his forearms, the pillar exploded. Pieces of rock flew in all directions. Zelthos stood among the rubble without a single scratch on his armor. The crowd went wild. The judges gave him the highest score, yet Danny Cole watched all of this from the human section of the arena. His stomach felt tight. The human diplomats had told him that someone from their delegation had to participate in the trials. It was a matter of galactic politics. If humans refused to compete, it would be seen as an insult to the Emperor. Danny had volunteered because he did not want any of the diplomats to get hurt. Now he was starting to regret that decision. When his name was called, Danny walked into the arena on shaking legs. The crowd fell silent, then began to laugh. He was small. He was soft. He had no scales, no mental powers, and no muscles that could shatter stone. The trial for lesser contestants was an obstacle course. It had been designed for beings 3 times the size of a human. There were walls to climb that reached 30 feet high. There were gaps to jump that stretched 20 feet wide. There were weights to carry that would crush a normal person. Danny looked at the course and knew he could not complete it the way it was meant to be completed. He simply was not strong enough, or fast enough, or big enough. But Danny had never let that stop him before. When the signal came, he began to run. He reached the first wall and did not even try to climb it. Instead, he looked for another way. He found a small gap near the bottom where the wall met the ground. It was barely big enough for him to squeeze through, but he made himself flat and pushed through to the other side. The crowd murmured in confusion. The first gap was too wide to jump. But there were rocks scattered around the arena from the earlier displays. Danny grabbed the smaller ones and threw them into the gap, creating a path of stepping stones. It was slow and awkward, but he made it across. The weights were impossible to carry, so Danny did not carry them. He found a metal beam nearby and used it as a lever to roll the weights instead of lifting them. It was not pretty. It was not impressive. But Danny finished the course. He came in last place. The crowd laughed again, louder this time. But then something unexpected happened. One of the contestants from a minor species had fallen during the obstacle course. He was hurt and lying on the ground, unable to move. The other suitors walked past him without looking down. Prince Drankith stepped over him. Lord Sithax ignored him completely. High Commander Zelthos kicked dirt in his direction. Danny stopped. He went back. He helped the fallen alien to his feet and supported him as they walked together to the finish line. The crowd grew quiet. Princess Valethra leaned forward in her seat. She had been watching the human closely since the night of the feast. She had expected him to fail the trial, and he had. But she had not expected him to be the only one who showed kindness to a fallen competitor. The second trial was the trial of wisdom. The suitors were taken to a chamber filled with ancient puzzles. These puzzles had been created by the greatest minds in the Empire. They tested logic, strategy, memory, and understanding. Each suitor had to solve as many puzzles as possible within a set time. Prince Drankith solved his puzzles quickly. He had a computer implanted in his brain that processed information faster than any organic mind could. Lord Sithax simply read the answers from the minds of the puzzle makers who were watching from nearby. High Commander Zelthos had no patience for puzzles. but his advisors fed him answers through a hidden communication device in his ear. Danny had no computer brain, no mental powers, and no one whispering answers to him. He solved puzzles slowly and carefully. He got many of them wrong, but the ones he solved honestly. More importantly, Danny asked questions that no one else thought to ask. One puzzle presented a scenario where a city could be saved by sacrificing a small village. Most suitors quickly calculated the numbers and chose to sacrifice the village. Danny stared at the puzzle for a long time. Is there no way to save both? He asked. The judges told him that was not the point of the puzzle. Maybe it should be, Danny said. He failed that puzzle. But the puzzle makers looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. No one had ever questioned the puzzle itself before. The third trial was the Trial of Heart. This was the most mysterious of all the trials. Each suitor was placed in a simulation without knowing they were being tested. The simulation read their deepest values and fears. It showed what kind of person they truly were when they thought no one was watching. The results were announced publicly, but the details of each simulation remained private. Prince Dranketh scored highly on ambition and strategic thinking. The judges said he would make a powerful ruler who always planned 10 steps ahead. Lord Sithax scored highly on self-preservation and cunning. The judges said he would never be caught off guard by an enemy. High Commander Zelthos scored highly on loyalty and dominance. The judges said he would protect his own people with fierce devotion. When Danny Cole's results were announced, the judges seemed confused. They whispered among themselves for several minutes before speaking. His primary values were listed as compassion, curiosity, and something that did not translate well into their language. The closest translation was the desire to leave things better than he found them. The crowd did not know what to make of this. Those were not the qualities of a warrior or a king. Those were the qualities of a servant. But Princess Valathra finally smiled for the first time since the selection ceremony began. She understood now why. She could not stop watching the human. He was not trying to win. He was just trying to help Dot, and in a galaxy filled with beings who only wanted to take. That made him the most interesting person she had ever met. After the 3 trials ended, the selection ceremony entered a new phase. The suitors were expected to spend time in the palace, attending formal events and trying to impress the princess through conversation and charm. Most of them gathered around Valathra like hungry animals circling prey. Princess Valathra hated every moment of it. Prince Dranketh talked only about his conquests. Lord Sithax tried to use his mental powers to make her feel attracted to him, not knowing that royal blood was resistant to such tricks. High Commander Zelthos rarely spoke at all. He simply stood near her and waited, as if she would eventually choose him out of fear. Valathra escaped whenever she could. She used the hidden passages of the palace to slip away from the crowds. She wandered the service corridors and the old gardens that no one visited anymore. One evening, she found Danny Cole in the lower levels of the palace, near the old fountain gardens. The fountains had stopped working years ago. They were relics from an earlier age, when the palace was young and the empire was still growing. Now they sat empty and forgotten, covered in dust and silence. Danny was kneeling beside one of them, his toolbox open on the ground. He was studying the ancient pipes and mechanisms with careful attention. "What are you doing?" Valathra asked. Danny jumped at the sound of her voice. He nearly dropped the tool in his hand. When he saw who was speaking to him, his face turned red. "Your Highness," he said quickly, "I apologize. I did not mean to trespass. I was just looking around, and I found these fountains, and I thought maybe I could fix them." Valathra finished. Danny nodded. "Someone built these a long time ago. They put a lot of care into the design. It seems wrong to just let them stay broken." Valathra looked at the dusty fountains. She had played near them as a child, back when they still worked. She remembered the sound of water flowing over crystal stones. She had not thought about them in many cycles. "No one will thank you for this," she said. "No one will even know?" Danny shrugged. "That is okay. I do not fix things for thanks. I fix them because they need fixing." Valethra sat down on a stone bench nearby. She watched Danny work in silence for a while. His hands moved with confidence and skill. He understood the old machines even though they were nothing like the technology of his world. "How do you know what to do?" she asked. "I look at how it was supposed to work," Danny said. "Then I look at what went wrong. Then I try to make it right again. It is the same with everything, really. Machines, buildings, people. Everything breaks eventually. The question is whether someone cares enough to put it back together." Valethra thought about his words for a long time. "The other suitors would never do this," she said finally. "The other suitors are here to win something," Danny said. "I am just here because my government told me to come. I am not really competing." "Then, why did you participate in the trials?" Danny stopped working and looked up at her. "Because someone had to. And I did not want my friends to get hurt trying." They talked for hours that night. Danny told her about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans, about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity and the hope that had kept them going. He told her about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and about how he had learned to fix things by taking apart his father's old radio. When he was 7 years old, Valethra told him about her life in the palace, about being treated like a symbol instead of a person, about the endless ceremonies and rituals that meant nothing to her, about the loneliness of being surrounded by millions of subjects who loved the idea of her but did not know who she really was. Danny listened without trying to offer solutions. He just listened. That was rarer than Valethra had expected. In the weeks that followed, they met again and again. Danny taught her a card game from Earth called poker. She was terrible at it at first, but she enjoyed the way Danny laughed when she made mistakes. It was not mocking laughter. It was warm and kind. She showed him the hidden gardens where she had spent her childhood. She showed him the library of ancient books that no one read anymore. She showed him the room at the top of the highest tower where she went when she wanted to feel small and wonder at the size of the universe. Danny treated her the same way no matter where they were. He did not bow or scrape or try to impress her. He just talked to her like she was a person, like she was his friend. Valethra had never had a friend before. The other suitors began to notice that the princess was spending time with the human. At first, they laughed about it. The human was nothing. He was weak and small and unimportant. The princess was probably just amusing herself with a curiosity. But as the weeks went by, the laughter stopped. The suitors began to see Danny as a threat. Prince Drankith ordered his spies to plant false evidence in Danny's quarters. They left stolen items from the palace treasury, hoping that Danny would be accused of theft and imprisoned. Danny found the items and returned them to the palace guards. Explaining that someone must have made a mistake, Lord Sithax tried to use his mental powers to make Danny feel fear and paranoia. He wanted Danny to lose his mind and be sent home in disgrace. Danny felt the strange pressure in his head, but he had learned a trick during his years as a maintenance worker. When things got stressful, he focused on the problem in front of him. He let everything else fade away. The mental attack could not find a hold in a mind that was too busy solving puzzles. Commander Zelthos took a more direct approach. He arranged for Danny to have an accident during a tour of the palace grounds. A walkway collapsed under Danny's feet. A window shattered near his head. A vehicle nearly ran him down in the corridor. Danny survived each time through luck and quick thinking. He dove when he should have frozen. He ran when he should have hesitated. His instincts were sharper than anyone expected. The human delegation begged Danny to withdraw from the selection ceremony. They told him that his life was in danger. They told him that no one expected him to win anyway. They told him to go home before something terrible happened. Danny refused. "I have made a friend here," he told them. "Where I come from, you do not abandon your friends just because things get hard." He did not say that the friend was the princess. He did not need to. Everyone knew. The other suitors grew more desperate. They could not understand how a weak, ordinary human had captured the attention of the most powerful woman in the galaxy. But Valethra understood. She understood it better than she had ever understood anything in her long life. Danny was kind when he had no reason to be. He was brave when he had every reason to be afraid. He fixed broken things because they needed fixing, not because he wanted reward. In a galaxy full of people who only took, Danny was someone who gave, and Valethra was beginning to realize that she did not want to let him go. High Commander Zelthos was not a patient being. He had spent his entire life taking what he wanted through force. When his schemes to eliminate the human failed, he decided to use a more direct method. On the morning of the 27th day of the selection ceremony, Zelthos stood before Emperor Korath and invoked an ancient rite. It was called the Challenge of Supremacy, and it had not been used in over 1,000 cycles. "I challenge the human called Danny Cole," Zelthos announced. His deep voice echoed through the throne room. "Single combat. To the death. The loser forfeits all claim to the princess." The throne room fell silent. Emperor Korath sat very still on his throne. His purple eyes studied the massive warrior standing before him. The challenge of supremacy was part of the oldest laws of the empire. It could not be refused without bringing shame upon the challenger and the challenged alike. But this was clearly murder dressed in legal clothing. Danny Cole was a maintenance engineer. Zelthos was a warrior bred for killing. "Father," Princess Valethra said from her seat beside the throne. Her voice was tight with anger. "This is not a fair contest. The human has no combat training. The law does not require fairness," Zelthos replied. "It requires only that both parties agree to fight. If the human refuses, he admits his unworthiness and must leave the ceremony immediately." Valethra looked at her father with desperate eyes. But Emperor Korath could only shake his head slowly. The ancient laws bound even him. "Bring the human," the emperor said quietly. Danny was working in the lower levels of the palace when the guards found him. He had finally gotten the old fountains working again. Water was flowing through the crystal stones for the first time in decades. Danny was standing back to admire his work when the guards appeared. "What is happening?" Danny asked as they led him through the corridors. The guards did not answer. Their faces were grim. When Danny entered the throne room and saw Zelthos standing in the center, he understood. He had heard stories about the challenge of supremacy. He knew what it meant. "The human has been challenged," Emperor Korath announced. "High Commander Zelthos of the Kryn hegemony demands single combat. The contest will be held at dawn tomorrow in the Grand Arena. It will end only when one combatant is dead or surrenders completely." Danny looked at Zelthos. The warrior was twice his height and 4 times his weight. His forearms were thick with muscle. His skin was like armor. His eyes showed no mercy. Then Danny looked at Valethra. Her silver face was pale with fear. She was gripping the arm of her chair so tightly that her fingers left marks in the stone. "I accept the challenge," Danny said. The throne room erupted in noise. The other suitors laughed and cheered. The human delegates shouted in protest. Emperor Korath closed his eyes as if in pain. Valethra did not make a sound. She just stared at Danny with an expression he could not read. That night, she came to his quarters. The guards let her pass. She was the princess, and her father had given orders that she could go anywhere she wished. But when she stepped into Danny's small room, she did not look like a princess. She looked like a frightened woman who was about to lose someone she cared about. "You have to withdraw," she said. "Tell him you refuse. Tell him you were wrong to accept. I do not care what it costs. I cannot watch you die." Danny was sitting on his bed, looking at his hands. He seemed calm, which made no sense to Valethra. "I cannot withdraw," he said. "If I do, I have to leave the ceremony. I have to leave the palace. I have to leave you. That is better than being dead." Danny looked up at her. His brown eyes were steady and clear. "Your Highness," he said, "I have spent my whole life being underestimated, being told I am too small, too weak, too ordinary to matter. Everyone looks at me and sees someone who cannot possibly succeed." He stood up and took her hands in his. It was something no common person had ever dared to do. Valethra did not pull away. "But I have learned something over the years," Danny continued. "It is not the size of the person in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the person." "That is a nice saying," Valethra replied. "But Zelthos is a killing machine. He has never lost a battle." "That is true," Danny admitted. "But I have been watching him. He has never fought anyone who was not afraid of him. Fear is his real weapon. He expects his enemies to freeze, to make mistakes, to give up before the fight even begins." Danny smiled. It was a strange smile, full of peace instead of fear. "I am not afraid of him," Danny said. "I am just stubborn. And sometimes, stubborn is enough." Valethra wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that stubborn was not enough, that he was going to die, that she could not bear to lose the first real friend she had ever had. But she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. It was not foolishness or false courage. It was genuine belief. Danny really thought he could win, not through strength, but through will. "If you die tomorrow," Valethra said quietly, "I will never forgive you." Danny laughed softly. "Then I better not die." The dawn came too quickly. The grand arena was filled with spectators from every corner of the galaxy. They had come to watch a bloodbath. They had come to see the foolish human finally get what he deserved for daring to dream. Above his station, Zelthos entered first. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed in the morning light. His forearms carried weapons designed to kill in 100 different ways. The crowd roared with approval. Danny entered from the opposite side. He wore borrowed armor that did not quite fit. He carried a standard combat blade that looked like a toy compared to Zelthos' arsenal. The crowd laughed. Emperor Korath stood on his platform and raised his hand for silence. "The challenge of supremacy will now begin," he announced. "May the strongest prove their worth." Zelthos did not wait for the echo to fade. He charged at Danny with terrifying speed. His forearms swung in complex patterns designed to overwhelm any defense. Danny did not try to block. He dove to the side, rolled across the ground, and came up running. He was not trying to fight. He was trying to survive. The crowd booed. They wanted blood, not running. But Danny was not running out of fear. He was studying his opponent. He watched how Zelthos moved, how he balanced his weight, how he recovered between attacks. Zelthos was fast and strong, but he was also arrogant. He had never fought an enemy who refused to stand and be killed. Each time Danny dodged instead of fighting, Zelthos grew angrier. And anger made him sloppy. Danny noticed a pattern. After each combination of attacks, Zelthos extended his upper right arm just a little too far. It was a tiny mistake, invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. But Danny had spent his life noticing small things. He waited for his moment. Zelthos charged again. Danny dodged left, then right, then ducked under a sweeping blow. Zelthos swung with his upper right arm, extending just a little too far. Danny moved toward him instead of away. It was the last thing anyone expected. He slipped inside Zelthos' guard, and grabbed the extended arm with both hands. Then he pulled with all his strength while driving his shoulder into the warrior's chest. It was a wrestling move he had learned in high school. It was not elegant. It was not graceful. But it used Zelthus's own momentum against him. The massive warrior stumbled. For the first time in his life, he lost his balance. He fell forward, and Danny moved aside just in time. Zelthus crashed first into the arena floor with a sound like thunder. Danny stood over him with his blade raised. One strike would end the fight forever. The crowd fell silent. No one could believe what they were seeing, but Danny did not strike. He lowered his weapon and stepped back. "I did not come here to kill anyone," he said, breathing hard. "I just came to fix things." Zelthus pushed himself up from the ground. His face was twisted with rage and shame. He had been defeated by a creature he considered worthless. His honor was destroyed. For a moment, it seemed like he would attack again. But then he looked around at the silent crowd, at the other suitors who were staring in disbelief, at the princess whose eyes were bright with tears. He knew he had lost. And not just a fight. "I surrender," Zelthus said. The words sounded like they caused him physical pain. Danny Cole, the maintenance engineer from Ohio, had won. The defeat of High Commander Zelthus sent shockwaves through the selection ceremony. No one had expected the human to survive, let alone win. The impossible had happened, and now everything was different. The other suitors reacted with fury. Prince Dranketh stood before the Emperor and demanded that the results be thrown out. He claimed that Danny must have cheated somehow. No weak human could defeat a Kryn warrior in fair combat. There had to be trickery involved. Lord Sithax used his mental powers to search Danny's mind for evidence of deception. He found nothing except memories of a simple life, filled with broken machines and the patience to fix them. Representatives from a dozen star systems threatened consequences if the princess chose the human. They spoke of trade embargoes, broken alliances, and even war. The Valorian Dominion alone controlled enough warships to burn the Solarian Empire to ashes. Emperor Korith sat on his throne and listened to all of it. His face showed nothing, but his heart was heavy. He had wanted the best for his daughter. He had never imagined that the best might be a small human with rough hands and a gentle smile. "Father," Valathra said when the throne room finally emptied, "you know what I'm going to do." The Emperor looked at his daughter. She had grown so much in the centuries since she was born. She had his eyes and her mother's strength. She was the future of the Empire, and she was about to make a choice that could destroy everything. "I know," he said quietly, "and I cannot stop you. The laws of the selection ceremony are clear. You may choose whoever you wish. Will you accept my choice?" Emperor Korith was silent for a long time. Then he smiled, and it was a sad smile full of love. "You are my daughter," he said. "I will always accept you, even when you terrify me." The final ceremony was held 3 days later. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy filled the Grand Hall. Floating cameras broadcast the event across thousands of worlds. Billions of beings were watching, waiting to see what the princess would do. The remaining suitors stood in a line before the Imperial platform. Prince Dranketh still looked proud, confident that the princess would see reason in the end. Lord Sithax kept trying to influence her mind, though his efforts bounced off her like water off stone. Danny Cole stood at the back of the line. He was wearing the best clothes the human delegation could find for him, but he still looked out of place among the glittering aliens. He did not seem nervous. He just seemed like himself. Princess Valathra descended from the platform. She wore a gown of living starlight that had been passed down through her family for 10,000 cycles. Her silver skin glowed with inner fire. Her purple eyes were calm and clear. She walked slowly past the suitors. Each one stood taller as she approached, hoping to be chosen. Each one fell back into disappointed silence as she kept walking. She stopped in front of Danny. The grand hall went completely silent. Billions of beings across the galaxy held their breath. For 300 cycles, Valethra said, her voice carrying through the vast space, I have been told what I am. A princess. A prize. A piece in games played by beings who see the universe only as something to be conquered. She looked back at the other suitors, at the dignitaries, at her father on his throne. I have watched the most powerful beings in the galaxy compete for my hand. I have seen strength used for conquest. I have seen wisdom used for manipulation. I have seen hearts hardened by ambition until they forgot how to feel. She turned back to Danny. He was looking at her with an expression of pure wonder, as if he still could not believe any of this was happening. And I have seen a man fix a broken fountain because it mattered to no one except him. I have seen courage without cruelty, intelligence without arrogance, and a heart that believes the purpose of power is to help those who have none. She took his hand, his rough, calloused human hand. I choose the human, she said. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Prince Dranketh shouted threats of war. His ambassadors began sending emergency messages to the Valorian fleet. Lord Sithax collapsed in shock, his mental powers failing him completely. Dignitaries from 100 worlds rushed toward the exits, eager to report this impossible news to their masters. But Emperor Korath raised his hand, and a wave of silence swept through the hall. My daughter has made her choice, he said. His voice was strong and final. By the ancient laws of the selection ceremony, her choice is binding. Anyone who challenges this decision challenges the Empire itself. The threats continued in whispered form, but no one dared to speak openly. The Solarian Empire was still the most powerful force in the known galaxy. War was possible, but victory was not certain. In the chaos, Danny and Valethra stood together, still holding hands. Around them, the galaxy was reshaping itself. Old alliances crumbled. New possibilities emerged. Are you sure about this? Danny whispered. I am just a maintenance engineer. I fix things. I do not know how to be royalty. Valethra smiled at him. It was a real smile, warm and full of joy. Then we will figure it out together, she said. That is what partners do. In the years that followed, Princess Valethra and Danny Cole became something the galaxy had never seen before. They did not rule through fear or force. They ruled through example. When there was a dispute between star systems, they did not send warships. They sent diplomats and engineers. They fixed problems instead of creating new ones. When planets faced famine or disaster, they organized relief efforts that brought enemies together as allies. They proved that cooperation could achieve what conquest never could. Slowly, the threats of war faded. The Valorian Dominion discovered that trade with the human alliance was more profitable than fighting them. The Kryn hegemony learned that there was honor in building as well as destroying. Even Lord Sithax eventually admitted that the human had qualities his mind-reading powers had failed to detect. Danny never stopped being himself. He still fixed things with his own hands. He still walked through the service corridors of the palace, checking on the machines that kept everything running. He taught Valethra how to play poker, and she taught him how to dance among the stars. When their first child was born, a beautiful girl with silver skin and brown eyes, the galaxy celebrated. She was proof that different worlds could come together. She was hope made flesh. Years later, when reporters asked Danny how a simple maintenance engineer had won the heart of the most powerful princess in the galaxy, he always gave the same answer. I just showed up, did my best, and tried to leave things better than I found them. That is all any of us can do. It was a very human philosophy. Simple, practical, and full of quiet wisdom. And slowly, despite everything that should have made it impossible, The galaxy began to understand why that mattered. Humans were small and weak and short-lived. They had no mental powers, no natural armor, no genetic advantages. They were newcomers to the stars. Barely a blink in the long history of the cosmos. They had something the other species had forgotten. They had the ability to care about things that did not benefit them. They had the stubbornness to keep trying when logic said they should quit. They had hearts that remained soft even when the universe tried to harden them. In the end. That was what made them special. In the end. That was what saved the galaxy. And it all started with a maintenance engineer who fixed a broken fountain because he thought someone should.